Hey everyone, my name is Rico. I gave a talk on preparing and getting a job in development at a Minnesota First software engineer meetup in, I believe, February of 2025. The presentation was recorded, but the audio quality didn't come out great because the wireless mic I was wearing wasn't functioning right. So instead of it just being lost to time and just giving people a PSD, or not a PSD, but a collection of slides, I thought I would re-record it here. That way it still can be used. I got the comment from a lot of people that it was comprehensive and useful, and a lot of people learned new things that they weren't aware of. So I figured there was a lot of value in not letting this get lost. So here we are, re-recording it for you guys. There's not so much of the audience participation to kind of fall back onto in this presentation, but if you want that, then that's more of an incentive to go to one of our meetups. Um, Originally, we were supposed to have on the day of a presentator that specialized as a recruiter in the technology sector that knew a lot of these talking points. Unfortunately, they weren't able to make it, so in a frantic rush, I went ahead and put together this presentation. Myself, I'm a developer and have been professionally for 5 years. Currently, I specialize in using PHP at an e-commerce company, specifically the Laravel framework. But just as with any other developer, I try to diversify my knowledge, and I try to contribute to open source software for Minnesota First as well. With Minnesota First, I've been a volunteer for about 7 years, and I've been on the board for 4+ years. My background. Um, I don't have a ton of knowledge of when it comes to like recruiting and whatnot for these tech sector, but with this presentation and the forecast of potentially not having a presenter, I did a ton of research. I learned a ton of new things, and so I like to think that a lot of my knowledge is helpful. I think I forgot to um, disable Steam, but we'll just ignore those notifications. I don't really want to start this recording over. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things here, and there's going to be a lot of different sections of this presentation that we're going to go into. We're going to talk about the hiring pipeline, the hidden job market, how to format your resume, if GitHub is useful as a resource, and how to combat ATS, which is the applicant tracking system for the job industry. So the first thing actually I want to talk first about is the hiring pipeline, which is basically from the start to the end. I'm talking the pipeline of when you submit your application, what is that route that application takes, eventually to the point of getting a potential, hopefully, job offer from the company that you're applying for. So first off, for the hiring pipeline, when you submit a resume, it's usually not monitored or reviewed by humans anymore right off the bat. It goes through something called the ATS, which is the applicant tracking system. This is not relevant for every company, and a lot of the things I'll say today isn't always relevant for every single job that you apply for, but it's kind of the industry standard for a lot of the larger jobs. For large companies, the human resources department doesn't really have the time to go hundreds or even sometimes thousands of applications. So they use something called the ATS to kind of go through all these applicants and vet them, which kind of sucks because a robot is first determining if you're a good fit or not before they even start making phone calls or line up resumes or even looking at your resume to see what your skills are that apply to the job. The ATS machine usually will typically look through keywords. It will look at your experience and it will look at your formatting. It doesn't care anything about your personality, not yet at least. So we'll talk a little bit more about what's important when it comes to the ATS thing and how you can kind of cater to that. And also with the ATS, even though it's a machine, it does factor things like clutter or too many images or diversifying different fonts. It actually does check that information. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So with the ATS, it basically goes through and it does all these different things. So we'll talk more about that here in a moment. After the ATS, it will then kind of go through a recruiter. They go through the application and make sure that you're a real human to some degree, and not just a bot that's completing applications on someone's behalf. There's things that they check for that. If they do get to a phone kind of screening, they'll sometimes call you and want to learn a little bit more about you. Part of the reason that they call is kind of helps vet if it's a real person. And sometimes they'll talk about salary, which never say a number first. You kind of want to work on kind of moving up and moving forward. If you're moving from a previous job into something new, it's usually a good idea to kind of aim for a higher salary. Um, Sometimes people will ask you for a number, just kind of feel it out and see what number they're going for first. Cause give a number that's too high, they're probably going to pass on. And it's a really good idea just to understand what they're budgeting for that position, where you kind of get yourself lined up for a job that ends up not actually being what you want. And going through the effort of a job interview and a screening and whiteboarding and a project, you want to know the pay before you put a lot of your time into it. So after HR handles your application, it will move on to somebody usually in the department to screen you. HR doesn't care about what your programming language is. They don't care about syntax. They don't care about your GitHub and reviewing all that. They just care about your experience and everything basic from an HR perspective. When it goes into the engineering review, that's a little bit more of when it matters more. Sometimes they'll, this is like the meat of the interview. This is when they'll ask you about previous projects. They'll talk to you about your frameworks and your knowledge and how long you've been involved with it. They'll ask you to talk about some of your previous job experience. And if things are going well, then typically they will present to you some coding challenges. They'll sometimes present to you like an example or a scenario, and they'll ask you to how would you tackle it. But we'll talk more about that a little bit later. And sometimes some places will have you do a live coding interview. Meaning that if it's online, they'll typically have follow along with abilities. Sometimes they'll have you take a project. It kind of varies. So let's talk a little bit more about that whole ATS thing I was talking a moment ago, because this is the one thing that not a lot of people factor in as a maybe. Keywording, formatting, and auto reject traps are things that we want to avoid. First thing that it does is with ATS machines, which is what companies typically use, and it's advertised to these companies because it saves HR time from that whole, like I said earlier, cycling through thousands of resumes. They'll usually put it up alongside the job description. They'll compare resumes with keyword matching and skills matching. You match the job description. If they're looking for a database analyst and they want to know your experience there, they're going to be looking for keywords that are relevant to the job description. MySQL, Mongo, SQL Server, different things that it comes to database analyzing. And they might be looking for other things like other keywords related to that skill. Like, for example, with my Laravel one, my current job, if we were looking for an applicant, we would Roku experience, MySQL, Laravel, relational databases. All of these are keywords that you want to have in your resume, so when the AI or the computer does the scanning of keywords, it matches. Clear formatting is important. You want to avoid fancy fonts. You want to avoid tables. You want it to be easily parsable by a computer. And most of us as developers should hopefully kind of understand what that means. Is we want to dumb it down as much as possible to keep this algorithm from being unable to search your resume. So avoiding tables, avoiding things that don't make sense, and you want a logical structure. Can the read your work history? And typically there's things that it will look like. It will look for the word experience, or it will look for a header called work experience. Keeping that clear and concise is definitely important for helping resume be parsable. And remember, just a strong resume is just a first step, but it's definitely a great step on getting in the door of somewhere for a job. One of my talking points on the back end here is application tracking systems are sold to companies to enable HR pros to reclaim as much as 40% of their time. Somebody from Robert Half had the words, the quotation of, "It can be hard to beat the AI without knowing phrases." What is it looking for? I mentioned this just a moment ago, and I don't know my own slide deck well enough apparently because I wrote this a couple weeks back. Exact job matches from the job description. No longer is it really a one size meets all or fits all resume kind of work. When it comes to applying for businesses, companies, make sure that the resume you're submitting with that application is relevant to what they're looking for. Also mention tools and technologies and list them explicitly. SQL, React, AWS, Cost Explorer, Postman experience. Tools are just as important as the technologies and how you use them. And if you have certifications and degrees and they're relevant, include them. If you have certifications and degrees, they don't care about them if they're not relevant to the job. You want to avoid using fluffy job titles. Use industry standard names. If you worked for a company and they had really fancy kind of job titles, that's cool, but you want to cater to ATS. And avoid keyword stuffing. Nobody wants to read Java 50 times. I was helping a friend who does help desk, not really so much development, but his resume used the word troubleshooting about 14 times. So if you can get that down to as little as possible and not repeat yourself, that's a great step. In the formatting, simple, clean text, no fancy columns or tables. You want clear sections, headings like experience, skills, education. I also mentioned top loading your resume. We mentioned it a little bit later here, so I won't go too much into it, but the 10-second rule is really important. Use a standard font, nothing crazy. Arial, Helvetica, those kind of things. Somebody from the presentation said that they keep two resumes. One resume they submit, which will appease to the ATS system, or the ATS, and then they keep another resume for humans. A little bit more prettied up and fancier and looks nicer, but is more parsable by a human computer. PDFs are scanned as images, so make sure that this text is searchable and not too hard for a computer to read. Weird fonts or graphics, avoid all those. Don't do any fancy icons or anything. If you have an icon in there for React, probably don't want to do that because the computer doesn't know what it means. And overly creative designs. If you want to be fancy and you're like a UI developer or a designer or UX, save that for a portfolio site or maybe for that version of your resume you're going to submit that's for humans to read. Something for the in-person kind of activity I had here, this resume example. What's wrong with it? What's going on here? Having an image of yourself is fine, but there's some other problems here. Like, for example, the skills and languages. I see this often. People will submit resumes with fancy little progress bars for how confident they are in skills or how well they proficient they are in skills. Having a React bar that's 75% full or having a PHP bar that's 100% full means nothing to a computer, so drop that. If you really want to do that, you save that for the human resume, but honestly, even that, not so much. And then another thing here is top loading the resume, which we'll talk about here in a moment, is you got 10 seconds to appeal to somebody. Because if they're going through hundreds of resumes, you want to grab their attention quick. So top loading your resume is pretty important. There's a really nice resource on the web, this jobscan.co site. What this does is you submit your resume alongside with a job description, and it will basically simulate the whole applicant tracking system process. Not exactly perfectly, but it's a really good step. Definitely for, if nothing else, the formatting. Making sure that fonts are and font size is good. Making sure that you're doing things like it likes formatting things like for job experience, it wants month and year. Or if you have your phone number and address on there, it really helps you kind of understand what's strong in your resume and what needs improvement. It's also pretty good at finding section headings. So if you have a header in your resume, but it can't find the work experience, it's going to let you know. So honestly, this is pretty useful. Jobscan.co for kind of strengthening out your resume for the whole ATS side of things. So what makes a strong resume? 10-second rule, clarity and measurable impact. And this is the whole 10-second rule thing that I was talking about earlier. Is you need to grab their attention within 10 seconds. If you can't grab their attention within 10 seconds, recruiter, their attention's gone and they're likely moving on to somebody else. They can't find what they need quick, chance that they might just pass you up. Top-loading your resume, like I mentioned earlier, your key info, your skills, your experience, easy to spot and at the top. If you want to have references or educational stuff, that's usually sometimes towards the bottom. But I know a lot of people don't have job experience, and so uploading their resume with the experience or skills is a little bit difficult. That space and fill it out with some projects. Use bullet points instead of walls of text. Nobody likes reading a novel in resumes. So when you use bullet points, it's a bit more parsable for a human to kind of go through, or even a computer, honestly, and go through and kind of make sense of something. Wall of text, it's digestible. And then consistency and formatting. It will catch and pick up on things like fonts and fonts variants. Well, something a little activity that you can do with a friend is take your resume that you have right now and show them it and give it to them for 10 seconds and take it back from them and ask them what info do they remember, what are your skills, where are you strong. That's a good way of finding out if your resume is well formatted or not. So this was something we did as a group the day of. So it's right now with you on YouTube. I'm going to show you a resume, and I'm going to count to 10. And when you see this resume, look through it real quick. You got 10 seconds. Kind of try to digest what's going on and where is this person strong. So for the first one here, we got a resume right here. Okay, that was 10 seconds. And that's usually how long somebody in a recruiter or HR will look at a resume, or even if you got into the engineering part of the interview process, 10 seconds. So pretend you were a developer or you work at a company that wants to hire someone to React, and you need someone that's good with GraphQL for the API endpoints, and you want somebody that has some Linux experience that can also do DevOps, that can deploy an application with maybe Nginx or Apache. Remember that resume you just looked at and that you looked at for 10 seconds? Can you remember if you saw anything that pertained to that? Remember seeing anything with experience for React, or anyone that might know Apache or Linux? Back real quick here, and we spend more time. We can see that their skills are here kind of stuffed at the bottom. And nobody's reading bottom to top. So looks like that they're proficient, and I only got the one first page here, but C, Python, Swift, Unix, Git. They're familiar with Java, C++, Go, MATLAB, JavaScript. So this probably would have been a little bit more useful towards the top, but it was stuffed away at the bottom. Something good, though, that they have here is the bullet points underneath their software project. It looks like this person has mostly experience with projects and less so with experience in employment. So definitely that's a strong suit. But let's look at another one here. The whole 10-second thing again here. So next one. All right. So about 10 seconds. Do you remember? Maybe using the same example here. You're looking for someone with React experience. Want someone that's a good web developer. You're looking for web applications developer. Some database knowledge and whatnot. Let's take a look again and see what was right and whatnot. So this one's nice. They have their professional summary at the top. This resume is a little bit more friendlier on the ATS side of things. They got work history clearly defined here, but we're not looking for the ATS stuff. Let's talk about patching things. Right at the top, they said that they are WordPress theming plugins, so probably PHP. Probably should have said that. Oh, they do see PHP there. CSS, JavaScript, PHP development. So this is probably more of a front-end kind of person. They got some skills over on the right there. JavaScript, CMS management. CSS isn't really a programming language, but front-end development for UX, that's important. They mentioned Agile workflow, so that's cool. They're familiar with Agile. And then they got their work history here. They got some education as well. They got the bullet points here of what they've done at the other jobs. Mentioned Ajax and JSON coding. Yeah, not bad. Well, definitely better than the other one. So, just remember, straight to the point. You want to include your action and impact. Like for example, manage several projects and contributed to software development. A little bit vague. What projects, what impact did it have? So instead, led development of a customer portal, reducing support tickets by 40%. That's more specific and that's more measurable. Straight to the point, action and impact. No buzzword overload. Dynamic self-starter with results-driven mindset. That means nothing to somebody. Use some metrics if you can. And use strong action verbs. Developed, optimized, led, you automated something. That is what people want to see. And make your numbers stand out. If you can't measure it, how do they know that it mattered? Companies like to see kind of metrics and measurables or working on projects or at previous companies. Something that's not super useful, improve database queries. What does that mean? Like, what did you improve about them? Something better is optimize database queries, reducing load time by 50%. That's great. Has an end user impact. Something else, worked on front end design. That's cool, but can we kind of pad that out a little bit to give it some metrics? Designed and deployed a React UI used by 1 of 10,000 customers. React UI, you got the technology in there, and you got a little bit of a metric there. Basically, what companies are looking for is, did you save time or money for the company? Did your work increase efficiency? How many users did you impact? For kind of scale, understanding that. That's all. Your resume is your first pitch. Make it clear, scannable, and impactful. That's a quote by me that I'm saying right now, literally right here. So, self-quoting. So, let's move into the next part here of portfolios and GitHub. Why side projects and documentation matter. I want to just preface this real quick. From the presentation, somebody asked, is it critical for GitHub? No, but does it help? Sure. If somebody's looking at 2 applicants and one person has a ton of experience in projects visible on GitHub of their own projects versus somebody that doesn't, it's kind of weighing towards the person with their GitHub. Why does it matter? It shows real-world coding skills, not just what's on your resume. Demonstrate initiative and passion for development. It lets recruiters see your documentation and style. And gives you an edge over your candidates who just list skills. Like I mentioned a moment ago, if somebody just lists all these skills and work experience, but then somebody else has their GitHub profile on there and it's got some projects, odds are that somebody probably won't take the time to pick through your projects and everything, but at least it shows that you have something out there. Pinned repos matter. Things that you're proud about, pin them on your GitHub. That kind of helps with showing what you're proud about. And it kind of makes it more front and centered and showcased. Clean, readable code. If you can't read your own code in 6 months, neither can your recruiters. Your README is your sales pitch. Explain what your project does. README is very important. It's also great for showing documentation. And commits and activity. Honestly, this is probably not super important, but if you got projects and it's working on it, that helps. Also, people can see your commits and activity on open source projects, and sometimes people do that, but not super critical. One of the things that we asked in the talk originally is, who here has a GitHub repo that they're proud of? And who here has GitHub repos that they hope nobody sees because they're not proud about it? This is my GitHub profile. It's kind of cool. Not a lot of people know this, but you can set a personal README file that will show up on your GitHub. So that's pretty neat. I like to do it because it kind of explains who I am and what I like doing and some of my proficiencies. And then some of the projects that I'm proud of, I have pinned, and I try to diversify it a little bit here. Back when I was younger, I played around with GameMaker and Godot projects, so that here is pretty cool, and diversifies a little bit, showing what I am able to do. Yeah, so that's there. A lot of people sometimes will ask, what if I don't have time for side projects and you don't have work experience? How can you fill out a GitHub? Find an open source project that you're proud of, or not you're proud of, but you use, and maybe you contribute back to it. Even small fixes count. Even like updates to documentation is sometimes important. It shows your willingness to contribute to other projects. Maybe write dev blogs, explain the problem that you solved. Maybe you don't want to share the code, or it's a closed source proprietary project at work. You can be vague and write a dev blog about how you implemented Redis to improve load times on things. Document your learning, tutorial code snippets or tech breakdowns, or refactor old code. Go back to a project that you have sitting on your hard drive and upload it to GitHub and refactor it and improve it. That's a great way to kind of fill out your GitHub. And then knowing the difference between when a portfolio site and GitHub is important. Portfolios, not super important, but maybe important for someone that's like a front-end developer or an artist or video editor. That's when portfolios are important. GitHub can't really do that. It lets you brand the site a little bit more here, just more than just GitHub. You can there we go. My headset turned off because there's no audio playing through it. I guess it doesn't pick up on the mic. Write about what you build, blog, case studies, challenges you faced. Portfolios kind of give yourself a space to shine. So ask yourself, if you had to pick one project to highlight on a portfolio website, what would it be? What would benefit from having a portfolio website instead of just having GitHub? What not to do on GitHub? Private repos only. If you have a GitHub and you only have closed private repos, it's not really doing you much good. Nothing to say that you can't have private repos, and private repos are sometimes useful on projects you're not quite ready to release, make public. Messy README is not super useful. Having nice README files is good. Make it readable. Spaghetti code, clean it up before sharing it. If you can clean it up with at least some comments or something, or make it a little bit more readable, that's always nice. And no context. Repo on your GitHub without explanation of what it does or what problem it's solving is. Something that I asked during the presentation is, what is worse? No GitHub presence at all, or an old repo full of broken spaghetti code? The hidden job market. Networking, referrals, and direct outreach. I don't remember where I got this quote from, but 80% of jobs are never posted publicly. How do you find them? Many jobs are filled before they're even listed. Companies prefer referrals or sifting through 500 or more resumes. Networking in direct outreach land you in faster than applying online. Ask yourself, have you ever found a job through a friend or through a LinkedIn message or a random connection of someone that you made? Somebody mentioned at the talk that they, and I'm going to quote this wrong, they had a professional contact that they knew from networking events, and they talked about things during networking, but it ended up coming back to them where that person outreached to them and said, hey, do you have experience such and such? We're looking for somebody. And I remember vaguely back when we met up at this dinner networking event that you mentioned that you worked with Unix. You have experience with Ubuntu, and you've done things with Docker, Jenkins. And we're looking for someone with that skill. That's a hidden job market right there. That refers to. Engage in tech meetups, conferences, and hackathons. Be active on LinkedIn and Twitter. Join Discord and Slack groups for tech professionals. And with these groups, try to give more than you take. Help others out, and they'll help you. I actually found my current job on LinkedIn. Robert Half saw my job skills on there in my endorsement, and they reached out with a position that they were looking or in Laravel. Apparently, Laravel was niche enough where they couldn't find anyone within their own network of candidates, so they went to LinkedIn and found me because I mentioned Laravel on there. The LinkedIn is definitely, from my experience. I have something here linked called HackerX. HackerX is a really nice networking group that's around the U.S. and I think worldwide even. They host meetups of people in the tech industry, and they usually will have sponsorships from different companies that are looking. So going to these places and networking, meeting other people, even if it's not businesses that are hiring, networking with other people in the industry helps. That's very useful. I know for sure that they've done them here in Minneapolis, and I've gone to a few. I've not found any jobs out of it, but I definitely have made some really nice connections out of that. How you can get referrals without being awkward: just find mutual connections on LinkedIn, engage in online communities, GitHub, forums, meetups. Probably not so much forums anymore, but meetups for sure. Offer value first, comment on their work and share the site, and then message with a specific ask, not just, hey, can you refer me? Another meetup that I wanted to talk about as well is, it's kind of a weird niche one, but 2600, the Hacker Quarterly magazine. It's a zine kind of style magazine that just talks about kind of like the hacker scene in tech. But the reason I bring it up is, in the backside of their quarterlies is they have meetups. And I'm only mentioning Minnesota because that's where we're based out of, Minnesota Furs. They have meetups. I think it says here that they are the Friday of the month, and they do them at Bloomington, at the Mall of America in the new North Food Court. Great place to meet other people and network. Meet up and meet some other people. Sometimes you don't know where it might lead. Think of networking like planting seeds. Some will grow into job offers. Some will grow into long-term industry connections. Some won't grow or go anywhere at all, and that's okay. It's a long game, not just a one-time event, but it's definitely something that will pay off for sure. So your takeaway from this is kind of like a homework thing: is what is one networking action that you can take this or next week? What can you do to network with other individuals? Maybe find a Reddit community. Maybe put in your calendar to go to a 2600 meetup and show off some projects, or meet other people and see what they're talking about. Or go to HackerX and see when their next meetup is, and maybe RSVP. For all things job applications are like lottery tickets. Networking is like building a bridge to your next role. On LinkedIn, I found that. I got the site less. So, technical interviews. Preparing for problem solving, not just code tests. Technical interviews are just about writing code. They test how you think. A lot of industries don't really expect you to kind of pull all the solutions out of your hat and be able to write it. They're curious of how you get to that point. It's what companies are really looking for, is critical thinkers. Problem-solving ability. Break down a problem logically. Communication. Can you explain your thought process while you're breaking it down and how you're getting to that solution? Adaptability. How do you handle challenges or edge cases? And collaboration. Can you take feedback and refine your solution? Those are all things that people. Coding tests don't test code. Coding tests don't test code. They test how you approach problems. So understanding the question, asking questions that clarify is important. It shows that you're not going to just hop in blind. You don't understand something, clarify. They like to see that. Break it down. Identify key constraints and edge cases. Like, for example, if this is looking for an int, what happens if we pass a string into it by accident? Plan before coding. Sketch your approach out loud. Like pseudo comment coding, where you put all your kind of your logic into comments and then you write the code out. People do that. And then optimize and communicate. Explain your solution clearly. All things that definitely help with that. Kind of things that people will ask in technical interviews is like, find the first non-repeating character in a string. I had a job interview somewhere, and they were asking some pretty intense questions about jQuery, and I had some of the answers, but there was one where I just did not, and I was clear and concise about I don't know the answer to this off the top of my head. These are the steps that I would take to find the answer. Usually with these technical interviews, you have other developers that are across the table from you, and relating, I mean, they're relatable. If you don't know something, just explain to them what you would do to find the answer, and odds are they will do the same thing as well. So that's sometimes a perfectly valid answer. You'll be asked things on like data structures and algorithms, the difference between arrays, hash maps, trees, graphs, for example. System design, how would you scale Twitter? Debugging challenges, what's wrong with this code? They'll show you code and ask you what's wrong with it. And then real world scenarios. Here's an API, how would you optimize this API to be more something that I think I was going to ask during the coding talk, but I forgot to, is what is one of the most ridiculous coding challenges ever been asked? You don't have to be the best coder, you have to be the best communicator. Think out loud, saying things like, well, here's my approach, state your assumptions. Well, I assume this input is always valid, but that's the whole kind of edge cases thing of, well, what if the API returns to us a date string that's not formatted properly? Optimize as you go. This works, but can we do better? And then those edge cases. What happens if the input we receive is empty, or if it's null, or it's just a string that's blank? Handling those edge cases, definitely a good thing that shows off to potential. You wouldn't run a marathon without training, so why would you go into an interview cold? There's some great resources out there to kind of help you with technical interviews. LeetCode and HackerRank for practice. Find a friend and just do a mock interview with them. That's a great first step to kind of get the edge off and get a little bit more comfortable. Use sites like Pramp and interviewing.io for free practice. And review your past technical interviews and learn from your mistakes. For all things that can help you prepare you better. And there's always a question, this came up during the talk as well, somebody's mentioned that preparing for the name a time when kind of thing. Name a time when you were presented with a challenge and how did you overcome that challenge? Most interviews love asking that question, and it really helps to have an answer ready. You look a lot more prepared when you're able to belt out an answer for that, opposed to if you sat there and you're like, well, there was one time when, if you can belt that out faster, it kind of shows you're more prepared. One of the things I asked the audience during the talk was, who's done a mock interview before? And who wishes that they had done a mock interview before their last interview? Soft skills and behavioral interviews, why they matter more than people think. You can be the best coder in the world, but if you can't work with people, clients, team, manager, luck. Soft skills matter in tech because most tech jobs are team-based. You're not coding alone in a cave. Some companies, probably actually more so, that might be true, depending on the size of the company you're working for. But if you're not working and applying for a super small company, odds are you're working on a team. Companies want problem solvers, not just code monkeys. Good communication means higher salary and leadership roles. Be able to communicate better. That kind of helps. But that's more so when you kind of get the job, not so much for the interview. And behavioral interviews weed out bad fits, not just bad coders. They're looking for personality during the interview as well. If they're feeling like they're hitting roadblocks communicating with you during an interview, what does that mean for when you something that was kind of a shout out to the audience. Who here has worked with a really brilliant but really insufferable developer? Super smart, but their communication skills are really rough to communicate. There's a process called STAR to kind of Go over that whole thing I mentioned before of name it, time, when. Um, STAR stands for situation, task, action, result. Basically, with situation, you want to set the scene. With the task, what was the challenge? The action, what did you do? And result, what happened? Um, Bad example, which is over the top. There's no way anyone would hopefully say this, but like, yeah, I had a tough project once, but I figured it out. A better answer is our team had a tight deadline. I needed to improve the deployment speed, which was the task. I automated the process, which was the action. Um, Being probably a little bit more technical with that, and we reduced deploy time by 60%. Things people, um, kind of some mistakes that I typically made is rambling with no structure. Keep it clear and concise. Being too negative, even bad situations should have some what of a positive takeaway from it. Don't take all the credit. If you worked with other people or other teams, show off that teamwork, not just your solo hero moments. And like I mentioned before, try to prepare your stories in advance. Don't just wing it. If you have a story ready to go, that's helpful. Um, yeah, that was the whole talk. The key lessons from today, basically, or from this presentation, is basically your resume needs to pass the 10-second test. Networking referrals open more doors than job boards. GitHub and portfolios prove your skills better than just words. Not a deal breaker, but it helps. And technical interviews test problem solving, not just syntax. And soft skills can make or break your job chances. So yeah, that was pretty much it. I hope you guys got something out of it. Through Minnesota Furs, we try to do software meetups every other month. So I definitely recommend checking out mnfurs.org at the event calendar. And even if you're not looking for work, software meetups are a really great place to see what people are working on and show off your own projects or just to meet other people. It's just another networking event, so it doesn't hurt to just check it out. So that was it. You guys enjoyed it, and good luck everyone with jobs. If you are looking for them, hopefully some of the stuff helped you out.